So, when you think of George Orwell's 1984, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's a very specific set of images, right?
Yeah, you've got it. Stalin, surveillance, totalitarianism. It's kind of the ultimate warning against a totalitarian state, and it's almost always seen as a direct shot at regimes like Stalin's Soviet Union.
But what if that's only half the story? What if the real inspiration for Big Brother's world wasn't some future nightmare, but a past empire? Okay, so let's dive into this. We're going to explore a really fascinating reading of 1984 that completely reframes it, not as a story about Stalinism, but as this chilling vision of imperialism brought home. So, a new colonial lens. What does that even mean? Well, this whole interpretation argues that Orwell basically took the methods of control he saw firsthand as a colonial police officer and just plopped them right down into London. The crucial point here is this. The systems of oppression in the novel, they're not just some made-up, scary future. Nope. They're a direct mirror image of how the British Empire was actually structured. The empire within Oceania. So how does this theory actually stack up when you look at the book? Well, let's start with something really basic. The world map in 1984. Okay, look at this. The endless war. It's not about the homelands at all. It's all about controlling these disputed territories, which, that's basically what we'd now call the Global South. It's a dead ringer for the old colonial scramble for resources and cheap labor. And what's really telling is how the people who live there are just erased. They're completely invisible, just another resource to be fought over. And get this, that colonial structure, it's copied and pasted right onto the social hierarchy of England, or Airstrip 1 as it's called. You've got the tiny, elite inner party, acting like the colonial bosses. Then there's the outer party, kind of like the local civil servants who do their bidding. And at the bottom, the proles, the huge population treated just like a fundamentally inferior native class.
So the big question is, how did the party, and by extension the colonial powers, actually keep that control? It wasn't just about boots on the ground or physical force. It was way more insidious. It was about controlling thought itself. Just look at this party slogan, proles and animals are free. Wow, that just screams the classic colonial mindset, doesn't it? This belief that the native population, the proles, are basically like animals. They're seen as incapable of higher thought, so they're not even worth watching closely. Their so-called freedom is just a symptom of them being seen as less than human.
And that brings us to this idea of the palimpsest, a page that's been scraped clean so it can be written on again. Well, this is exactly what colonial powers did. They'd erase indigenous histories to impose their own story, their own narrative. So when you think about it, Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth, it's not just rewriting history, it's basically literary colonialism, constantly scraping the past clean to serve the party.
But the ultimate weapon, the real game changer, is newspeak. A lot of postcolonial theorists argue that forcing your language on people is the most powerful tool an empire has. Why? Because it forces the colonized to think inside the colonizer's box. And Newspeak just takes that idea and cranks it up to 11, weaponizing language to literally shrink the possibility of ever having a rebellious thought. Okay, but let's be real. Is there any actual proof that Orwell meant to do all this? Is this just us reading into it? Well, the smoking gun might just be in his own life story. You have to remember, before he was the world-famous George Orwell, he was just a guy named Eric Blair. And what was his job? He was an imperial police officer in Burma. He saw the whole oppressive system of empire up close and personal, and he grew to absolutely hate it. So you can't separate the guy who saw the empire from the inside from the author who wrote this terrifying book. The two are completely linked. And there's actually a name for this theory, the boomerang effect. The idea from Hannah Arendt is that all the brutal methods of control, the surveillance, the bureaucracy, the violence that are perfected out in the colonies, well, they don't stay there. Eventually, they boomerang back home to Europe. And if you look at it that way, 1984 is the ultimate literary boomerang. It's the story of all that colonial brutality returning to the very heart of the empire, to London. All right, rereading 1984's warning. So what does this all mean? What does looking at the book this way change about its warning? Well, when you lay it all out side by side, the parallels are, honestly, they're pretty striking. Just look at this. You can see the direct translation. The party is the empire, the proles are the natives, the disputed territories are just resource colonies, and Newspeak and the Ministry of Truth, that's cultural imperialism.
The entire power dynamic of an empire is just perfectly mapped onto the world of 1984. It's a mirror image. So this reading suggests that Orwell's warning was actually way more personal, more immediate. It stops being about some scary them over there, some foreign threat. Suddenly, it's about us. It's about the dangerous systems of oppression that any powerful society can create when it's ruling over others, and how those systems can eventually be brought right back home and used on itself.
And that leaves us with a really powerful and maybe a little unsettling final thought. If the tools of empire always boomerang back, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we look at the world today, where might we see that boomerang still in flight?